Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto falls in love with Nelliel Tu Odelschwanck, part 1. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. The blonde teen gazed at the rundown building that had belonged to his ancestors, when they had allied with the Hidden Leaf. It carried an artifact of great power, one that was meant to be guarded for, as long as time stood. It was both fortunate and unfortunate that this place had fallen so far under everyone's radar that it was unheard of for many years. If he had to guess, maybe a handful of people knew about this location besides himself, most of those people being dead anyway. Not that death could truly stop someone. He knew that firsthand the moment he discovered this place, as a boy. Back again, child. A gentle voice spoke, prompting him to turn his blue eyes over to the speaker. She was a woman of noble beauty and grace that had red hair styled into twin buns atop her head. Her eyes were pupilless, and shaded a dark violet, and her kimono looked to be of the finest quality. Acting as earrings were a pair of sealing tags, while the insignia of the Uzumaki clan rested on the back and heart of her clothes. Finishing off her look was her form being visibly transparent, and a thick chain that tethered her form to that of the rundown building. This was Mito Uzumaki, a deceased member of the Uzumaki clan, whose spirit had refused to leave the mortal plane, out of an impeccable sense of duty to her people. She once held the greatest of the Biju within her, the Kyuubi. She was the first to act as the beast's prison, while the young man before her was currently the third. A soft smile graced the blonde's face at a question. He never understood how he was able to see those who had died, but he didn't question it. In his eyes, speaking with the dearly departed helped stave off the bitter loneliness he suffered for most of his life. Mito being a member of his family only further pushed back those lonely thoughts. I just wanted to say goodbye before I left with Pervy Sage on our training trip. I don't know how long we'll be gone, so. Mito gave him a warm smile, as he trailed off, already used to seeing him act this way around her. It saddened her just how much hatred had taken a role in her younger clansman's life, especially when she knew that love was the key to holding back the influence of the beast he carried. She knew this better than anyone. I see. Well, be sure to continue your Genjutsu studies, dear child. I would hate for you to come back without something new to present to me, especially when you've been such a wonderful student over the years. He rubbed the back of his head bashfully, his closed eyes missing her brows furrow briefly. I promise, he replied. When he opened his eyes again, he gave her a sad smile, and moved in to embrace her, catching her slightly by surprise, since he had never done that before. What was more surprising was how she could actually feel him, and she could tell that the experience went both ways. I'm gonna miss you, she chuckled softly, as she returned his embrace. Kushina-chan will throw a fit if she ever finds out you inherited her little tick. I'm just glad that I have another thing to remind me of her, he mused, stepping away from the hot while a hand rested on the scarf neatly wrapped over his shoulders. Konohamaru had found it for Naruto after Tsunade had given the boy his grandfather's belongings he had left in the Hokage office prior to his death. Along with said scarf was an envelope addressed to the blonde, which held a photo of two people, his parents. It was such an emotional blow that he had stayed with Mito's spirit for a week before he returned to the village, no one knowing where he was due to the ignorance of the Uzumaki Mask Shrine. Mito was an emotional pillar for him, as well as a mentor who guided him through the methods of the infamous Uzumaki Genjutsu. Before he grew close to Tsunade, who Mito revealed to him was her granddaughter, Mito had begun to fill the void that had been placed in his heart the day he realized he had no parents. She did a fine job with that, Mito praised, fixing the loose knot that Naruto had tied to keep the scarf in place. Be sure to take good care of it, Naruto. I will. He gave the spirit one last embrace before he headed back to the village to meet Jiraiya at the gates. I'll be back stronger than ever, Mito Bot-chan. Count on it. When he was no longer in sight, she whispered aloud, I know you will, child. I suppose that you might consider this another form of bestial act, a very tall and light-skinned man asked, as he held up an unconscious and bleeding woman by the front of her clothes. Maybe it is, Nelliel, he continued, but at least it finally took care of you and your annoying ideals. A bit away from him was a pink-haired man with amber eyes, messing with a small device in his hands. Are you finished, Noitra-san? The woman is defeated, and your posturing is bordering on foolish. The 8th Espada of Hueco Mundo sneered at the scientific rancor. I'd watch your tone, Sailaporo, considering how you're not even being suggested for an Espada seat. Just finish setting up that damn thing, and let's get this over with. His sneer was aimed at the unconscious woman once more. I'm already sick of looking at this trash. Sailaporo sniffed dismissively, as he finished the final touches on his device. It's ready, he announced, gathering some of his, and pouring it into the device. Lazily, he tossed it in front of himself, and observed, as a garganta was formed, though this one didn't look even half as stable as a standard one. Hurry, and toss her through, the scientist sniped, clipping a bracelet around Nelliel's left wrist. That should allow me to record what happens with this experimental garganta. I must know if we're only connected to the land of the living, and the Serite. Don't presume to order me around, Noitra snarled out, as he dropped Nelliel carelessly onto the ground before brutally kicking her in her stomach, and through the garganta. Right, as she was passing through, a flash of pink light blinded the two ranker for a moment. When it cleared, they saw a young child that resembled Nelliel get swallowed by the Garganta, before the whole thing collapsed on itself. The moment made Neuter smile maliciously, as he turned away, and started heading back to Las Notches followed by Sailapur. Unknown to them, Nelliel's Frachian had crawled back to where their leader had been defeated. All they saw was a splash of blood that they knew belonged to her, and some strands of her beautiful turquoise hair. "What now, Pesh?" the larger of the two asked. "Nelliel Sama is gone, don't you know?" Pesh grit his teeth, and clenched his fists in shame for not being able to protect their leader from harm, and possible death. Neuter and Sailapur ground out, his self-shame feeding his growing rage. "We'll be back to avenge Nelliel Sama's cruel defeat at your hands. I swear." Getting to his feet with a hiss of agony, he turned away from the sight of Nelliel's blood, and stated, "Let's go, Dandachaka. We need to make ourselves scarce in case one of them comes back." The larger one gave a sad sigh at his friend's words, reaching down to gingerly grab the strands of hair before he too stood up painfully. He took a moment to weave the strands into two small rings before handing one to Pesh. The two put them on their dominant hands before they staggered away from Las Notches towards the seemingly endless desert that was Hueco Mundo. They would use the following years to become stronger than ever before, all in the name of avenging their closest friend and leader. Stupid pervert grumbled at a 16-year-old Naruto, as he looked over a sealing formula he had been designing for the past 2 weeks. "I told him I wasn't ready for that much of the fox's chakra." He was in the last quarter of the second year of his training trip, a month past his birthday. So far, the trip itself had been very underwhelming for the blonde Uzumaki, who was expecting to learn most of the tricks and skills that the Toad Sage was capable of using. That wasn't the case. Instead, the first year was devoted solely to mastering basics that should have been gone over by Kakashi, his official teacher since he had been assigned to Team 7. His Sujutsu had been smoothed out, so that he didn't fight like some common brawler. His chakra control exercises had increased in difficulty, and he had finally learned how to dispel doubt. It bothered him that it took an entire year to fix those concerns when Kakashi should have noticed them much sooner. No doubt he helped Sasuke figure out his own issues while he was teaching the Uchiha that damnable Chidori. He was going to hold on to that grudge for a while, considering how he had suffered being run through by that twice during his fight with Sasuke. The second year had Naruto practice with his Rasengan, while also trying to develop one that was larger, thereby giving it more power. While he had improved greatly in his chakra control, he couldn't make the larger Rasengan without the assistance of a clone. Thankfully, though, he was finally able to use his standard Rasengan one-handed. It was halfway through the second year that Jiraiya decided to start the real training. To Naruto's dismay, the Toad Sage felt that the best training Naruto could do was practice using the Kyuubi chakra, which he honestly hated to use. Sure, the power boost was phenomenal, but the aftermath of the chakra was not a fair trade in his eyes. His body was left weak, and his chakra coils would practically rage with pain, due to the corrosive chakra being pumped through them. Being the Jinchuriki of the chakra helped, but only by so much. And then, around 1 week ago, Jiraiya had the brilliant idea of loosening the seal, so that more of that twisted chakra could be accessed. The result was Naruto quickly losing control, and shifting into a four-tailed state, going into a berserker rage that could have wrecked the town just a couple miles away from their position. Luckily, Jiraiya had some suppression seals on hand, something Naruto immediately started working on, as soon as he recovered from the strain of the Bijuu chakra. He had just finished making a successful one the other day, which allowed him to resume his theoretical seal. Currently, he was seated atop the hotel building he and Jiraiya were staying at, waiting for the pervert to return from his daily session of spying on women. If there was one thing Naruto was most disappointed about concerning this trip, it was how the Toad Sage focused more on his research than actually training his so-called apprentice. He sighed, feeling depressed about the lack of real value this trip had. He was hoping to show Mito how much he had grown over the years, but the time away from the hidden leaf was being wasted in his eyes. Everything he had done barring the use of the Kyuubi's chakra could have easily been done within the village walls. What's she going to think when I come back barely any stronger? He mused sadly, afraid of disappointing his earliest mentor figure. He was broken from his thoughts when he felt a strange pressure bearing down over his form. Frowning, he pocketed his notes and stood up, looking around for the source. The sound of something being forcibly stretched had him turn his gaze upward, and his eyes widened when he saw the space within the evening sky gain a crack before stretching open like a cavernous entrance. The surprises didn't stop there, for he saw a bundle fall through the opening and start plummeting towards the ground about a mile off from this small town. Officially worried, Naruto pumped as much chakra as possible into his legs and raced off in the direction of the descending bundle. He kicked off trees as soon as he was around them, using them to propel him forward, while never losing sight of the bundle. As he drew closer, he saw long turquoise strands flailing behind the bundle like a makeshift tail. His eyes narrowed, and he unconsciously added some of the fox's chakra to his legs, as he kicked off another tree. This time, the kickoff sent him hurtling towards the bundle, and he caught it before flipping to his feet and landing safely back on the ground. Looking back up, he saw the strange spatial opening close, and the sky returned to normal. He frowned at it for a few more moments before he looked down at the bundle in his arms. Carefully adjusting his grip, he pulled back the cloth, and gasped softly at the sight of a small child with a terrible head wound that cracked a bone-looking mask on her head, and left a nasty gash on her forehead. To his relief, the blood had dried, and wasn't flowing, which meant that she should be safe from bleeding out. However, she could still have other major issues with a wound like that. He adjusted his grip on her again, so that he wouldn't jostle her too much, and then rushed off back to the town. But look, he'd be able to find a healer for the injured child. She just fell through some rip in the sky. The nurse repeated, as she looked over the unconscious child. To make the procedure easier, she had cut a child's hair short, so that its length wouldn't get in the way. Yeah. I was just on a hotel roof when I felt this odd energy spike, and then I saw a rip in the sky, Naruto explained once more. Is she going to be alright? The nurse hummed in concern, as she cleaned up the blood, and closed off the wound on the girl's head. What was odd to her was that the child's mask wouldn't come off, almost as if it were attached to the girl. She hasn't lost too much blood, and I'm having some tests so we can replenish whatever she has lost. This head wound, though, is particularly concerning. Was it deep? Naruto asked with a cringe. It was deep enough for me to note that this girl could suffer some serious mental damage, the most likely case being lost memories. What's also concerning is how this mask, she gestured to the cartoonish-looking piece, is attached to her. I can't remove it unless I wish to hurt her more, and I wouldn't. Do you think it could be linked to some undiscovered bloodline? Possibly. We can test her blood against other bloodlines that we have on file. Thankfully the medical centers in the Land of Fire stay up to date with one another, the nurse noted with a faint smile. So what happens now? Now? We let her rest, and have her on fluids. If you wish, you could stay with her until she wakes. That is, assuming she will wake up. As I said, her head wound was very concerning. Nodding in understanding, Naruto formed a clone to inform Jiraiya of his whereabouts, before he grabbed a chair, and took a seat next to the girl's bed. He looked at her unconscious face, and frowned sadly at something like this happening to a child. Hang in there, he whispered, gently grasping her smaller hand. You'll pull through. Her head was swimming with muddled voices, and blurry images that she couldn't connect. Her eyes clenched a few times before cracking open, revealing white hazel orbs to the world. They blinked to regain their focus before she frowned in confusion. Where is Nell? She asked hoarsely before coughing. The coughing stirred Naruto from his sleep, and he blinked in surprise at seeing the little girl awake after only a few hours. He pushed down his surprise in favor of grabbing a paper cup and filling it with water for the girl. Moving over to her, he used one hand to gently pat her back, while the other offered her the cup. Here, drink this. She didn't notice who handed her the cup. All she knew was that there was water in it, and that she was very thirsty. Taking it, she took a greedy drink to rinse her throat before coughing again, this time from drinking too fast. Easy now, Naruto gently urged, taking the cup to refill it. When he returned to her side, he helped her take sips of the water, so that she wouldn't choke again. After the cup was emptied again, he set it aside, and asked, "Are you alright?" Breathing better, the girl turned to the blonde, and met his blue eyes with her hazel ones. With a bright smile, she answered, "Yes. Nell is fine. Nell was just really thirsty. How at least she hasn't forgotten her name," he mused internally. He noticed Nell look around in confusion before asking, "Where is Nell, anyway?" "You're in a medical ward. You had a really big cut on your head, and you fell from the sky." "Oh really?" Nell asked in surprise. But Nell doesn't remember getting hurt or falling at all. He gently placed a hand on one of her shoulders to keep her in place. "Easy. You don't want to accidentally reopen your cut. Trust me, that hurts." She looked at him, and saw that he was smiling down at her. This helped her slowly relax, though her anxiety was still there. "Do you know what happened to Nell?" He shook his head sadly. "No, I don't. I caught you before you hit the ground, and brought you here, but I didn't see anything that hurt you." "Oh, your bracelet is next to you, by the way." She blinked before looking to the small stand, spotting the white bracelet in question. Her brows furrowed faintly, and she replied, "Nell doesn't remember seeing that before." "You were wearing it when I caught you," Naruto explained. She frowned at nothing before looking at him. Nell doesn't know what that bracelet is. Nell has never seen it before. The sureness in her voice made Naruto nod at her in response. "Okay then. I'll just toss it for you, alright." At her nod, he grabbed the item, and moved over to the waste bin. Just as he was about to toss it, he felt a twitch in his grip, and a blurry image flashed in his mind. He couldn't clearly make out what it was, save for it being a silhouette of something or someone. Linking back into focus, he looked at the bracelet resting on his palm with a frown. Something told him that the bracelet was more than it seemed, something darker. His frown deepened before he used chakra to grip and crush the bracelet, dropping the broken pieces into the trash bin. Turning to Nell, he made sure to give her a smile, as he declared, "There we go. In the trash." She smiled back, as he sat beside her once again. "So who are you?" "I'm Naruto Uzumaki of the Hidden Leaf." "Naruto?" she asked, shortening his name. He chuckled at that, and simply nodded. "You can call me Nell-chan if you want, Nell-chan." Her smile returned just as the nurse came in, and Naruto fought a snicker at how shocked she looked at the girl being awake and alert. With any luck, he'd be able to get her out of the medical ward by morning. Sailpour frowned when he noticed that the tracer he had placed on Nelliel vanished from the screen and had kept on for the past century. I was wondering how long this would last, he mused, as he started to work with the screen and study the results of the tracer. From what he could read from the data, the experimental Garganta he had kicked Nelliel into had a greater exposure to spacetime displacement. This meant that time acted differently inside of it compared to the outside world. What that also meant was that Nelliel could be in a world where only a minimal amount of time had passed compared to the century Hueco Mundo just went through. Making sure to gather everything he could on his findings, the Curate Espada left his personal area of Las Noches in search of Aizen. The man would no doubt be very interested in what had happened. What makes you think I'll let you drag a kid along with us during this trip? Jiraiya asked Naruto after he returned to the hotel room with Nell. The little girl was wearing the green covering she had been found in, but it was reformed into a gown with a hood that covered her entire body, save for her bare feet. She was currently standing beside the blonde while holding onto his left hand with her right, her hazel eyes looking around the hotel room, and the tall man in front of her, Rudo. I couldn't just leave her there, pervy sage, Naruto argued. Besides, I was the one who found her, so I'm choosing to be responsible for her. You really think you can handle that kind of responsibility? The man challenged. Probably better than you, Naruto fired back with a slight frown. Anyway, I'm not going to back down on this. If you really are so against me bringing Nell along, then I'll take her back to the Hidden Leaf by myself. The Toad Sage groaned as he palmed his forehead. By the sage, kid, you're really going to give me some early wrinkles. And the ladies hate wrinkles. Rolling his eyes, Naruto took that complaint as him winning the argument and walked with Nell over to his bed. You should probably get some more sleep, Nell-chan. I'll grab you something to eat when you wake up. But Nell isn't tired, she replied with a pout before she failed to stifle a yawn. Naruto chuckled at her embarrassed blush. I think you are. Just lie down and get some sleep, okay? I'll be here when you wake up. You promise? He heard her ask tiredly, already starting to succumb to sleep. He gave her another smile, this one truer than any he had showed his fellow ninja back home. Yeah, I promise. He waited for her to fully fall asleep before he gently patted the cracked part of her mask. Sleep tight, Nell-chan. Jiraiya silently watched the exchange, and was surprised at how calmly Naruto had handled it. He also noted how Naruto seemed less tense, and more relaxed around the green-covered brat. Humming softly in thought, he watched Naruto grab his toad wallet, and create a clone before leaving the hotel room. The clone then decided to lie on the bed beside Nell, and she almost immediately turned towards him, more than likely for his natural warmth. The Toad Sage couldn't fight the small smile that formed. If he didn't know any better, he probably would have assumed that the two were siblings, if not a father and child. Deciding to let it be, he left the hotel room to write a letter. No doubt Tsunade would want to hear about this. When the real Naruto returned, he noted that Nell was still sleeping, while his clone was also snoozing. Rolling his eyes in amusement, he put away the food he bought before he swapped places with and dispelled his clone. He smiled at Nell snuggling against him, and patted her mask again, this time letting his hand rest on the crack. To his surprise, he felt his hand stick to the mask, while a strangely fluid energy flowed from his chest, and down his arm, leaking out from his hand, and into the crack in Nell's mask. The eye holes of the mask then flashed a brilliant pink before the room was engulfed in pink smoke. When it cleared, Naruto was left in speechless awe at the sight of a full-grown woman who looked so much like the little girl he saved. Nell, he asked tentatively. The green gown had stretched and ripped, thankfully in a manner that covered her modesty, while her once short hair regained its original length and fullness. Her mask had also changed to a more goat-like appearance that greatly contrasted its once cartoonish look. She still had a scar and a crack in the mask, but a sheathed sword was now seen in her left hand, while her right rested against her head. Noticing that she was about to fall from the bed, Naruto quickly grabbed her shoulder to steady her. This got her attention, and she opened her eyes to meet his own, allowing him to see familiar hazel eyes. Nell, is it you? She regarded him silently for a few moments, searching with her eyes, and looking over his form. You're the human that saved me, she murmured. Naruto Uzumaki, right? He couldn't help but give an awkward chuckle. You were calling me Rudo earlier, but yeah, I'm Naruto. She took a moment to look around the room before a flash of realization appeared in her eyes. I was ambushed. Baited into a fight by Noitra after her eyes whitened in shock before turning back to Naruto. Was there anyone else with me? Two of their hollows like myself, but with their masks torn off. She was in a panicked state, he could obviously see it. I didn't see anyone else come out of that rip in the sky. Nell, just you. He saw her lean back, looking both horrified and devastated. I am sorry. Pashtanda Chaka, she whimpered, as tears started to form in her eyes, memories of her defeat mixing in with the good times she had with her Frachine. They were hurt, and I couldn't save them. I couldn't. Hearing enough, Naruto grabbed her shoulder once again, and pulled her into a comforting embrace. At first, she tensed and broke away, but he regripped both of her shoulders, and had her look him in the eyes. Her teary gaze met his understanding, and she stopped resisting before leaning into him and letting out a distraught wail of grief. As she wept, Naruto held her close to him, acting as her emotional pillow like Mito had done for most of his life. "I'm so sorry," he kept repeating in a whisper, hoping to comfort her more than he was currently able to. He didn't know how long he held her, but she was the first to move away, gently pushing back from him as she wiped the lingering tears. "Thank you," she whispered softly, almost unheard of. "Anytime," he replied, sitting across from her on the hotel bed. "So you are Nell, right? I suppose that's what my younger self was going by," she mused, grateful for Naruto's presence and his aid given to her childlike form. "My real name is Nelliel Tu Odelschwanck, and I was the third espada of Wako Mundo." "Wako Mundo?" Naruto repeated. "It's also known as the Hollow World. It's where hollows, like myself, reside. I'm a higher class of hollow, since I'm much more human-like in appearance save for my mask." "Is this something to do with spirits?" Naruto asked. She nodded, slightly impressed with his deduction. "Yes. But how did you do it?" She stopped before her senses picked up the faint feeling coming from his abdomen area. "You're spiritually aware," she concluded. "Interesting. Yeah, I've been able to see and talk to spirits for as long as I can remember. But no one else has been able to form what I've noticed, even when a spirit is right next to them." He then realized something and asked, "Wait, if you're a spirit, how come Pervy Sage and that nurse were able to see you?" She frowned at the question, thinking over what had happened after her defeat. "After I was ambushed and beaten, I was sent through an experimental garganta created by Sale Porgrans. My guess is that, since I reverted into a child form beforehand, the garganta had an effect on my spiritual composition and made me closer to a human." "I'm a bit lost," Naruto admitted. She smiled at his confession, once again thankful for his presence. It was helping her cope with everything that happened. "To keep it simple, I'm in a physical form that can interact with everyone, whether they can see spiritual beings or not." "Oh, that's easier to understand," he replied, bringing a fist into his palm. Her smile remained before she felt a small spike of pain from her mask. "It looks like I'm limited in time before I revert back into my younger state. I am still too unstable to hold my true form for too long." She looked him in the eye and continued, "I can see a great deal of compassion and understanding in you, Naruto Uzumaki. Please, take care of my younger self and keep trying to repair the crack in my mask. You have, which is spiritual energy. You must learn how to call upon it to fix my mask." Her head lowered as her hands clenched the covers of the hotel bed. They trembled slightly before she took a breath to calm her raging emotions. Looking back to him, she finished, "I hope to speak with you again soon. I find myself enjoying your company." He looked surprised at her statement before he smiled brightly at her. "No worries, Nelliel. I promise to do everything I can to help you, no matter what form you're in." And Naruto Uzumaki never backs down from a promise. Nelliel found herself impressed once more by the human before her. He had a heart, and that heart was a driving force in his life, something she could both appreciate and admire. Just as the eye holes of her mask flashed once more, Nelliel gave him one last smile before another burst of pink smoke filled the room. Once it cleared, Nell was seen resting on the bed once again, her mask once more cartoonish looking, her hair once again short, and her sword missing. How must be related to her true form, Naruto mused before he helped Nell get more comfortable in the bed. Looking down at her sleeping form, his eyes burned in growing determination, as he whispered Ryatsu's spiritual energy. "I have some serious training to do if I'm going to help you, Nell-chan," he then smiled, closing his eyes and shaking his head with a chuckle. "I always wind up in crazy situations, don't I?" Looking down, he gently grabbed his scarf and imagined the faces of his parents, Mito, and then Nelliel. "I've got a lot of promises to keep. No point in stopping now. I'll keep them all and make you guys proud," he declared softly. With his mind made up, he gathered his notebook on Genjutsu and opened it up to a blank page. He had some more seals to draw out. "He surprised me more often than I care to admit, boy," the Kyuubi spoke to Naruto during one of his thinking periods. It had been a week since the blonde Uzumaki had found Nell and met her true form, Nelliel. During that period, he had made good on his word about bringing the young-looking Aranker with him, and Jiraiya, and keeping an eye on her. She reminded him of how he used to act, as a child, vibrant, and naturally curious about the world around her. He hadn't made any breakthroughs on discovering his latent that Nelliel said he had, but that didn't stop him from going over many different theories concerning it using Genjutsu. Mito had told him that Genjutsu had limitless potential, and that the only time there were limits was when your creativity spontaneity dwindled. Thankfully, due to having a history designing pranks and thinking differently than others, Naruto had creativity in spades. He just needed to figure out how to apply it to his seals. "How so, Fox?" Naruto replied, sitting across from the caged Biju within the seal. "For starters, I'm surprised that you were able to see and interact with the lingering spirit of my first prison. That Uzumaki woman was terrifying with her seals, and she proved it by sealing me within her without any help. Mito-sensei thinks that my ability to see ghosts is linked to the seal my old man used on you. The dead demon-consuming seal summons a Shinigami, right? An avatar of death, yes. Since death was a part of your sealing, Mito-sensei thinks that I can see ghosts because I've been, in her words, touched by death. This means that I've been in contact with her around an incredibly potent level of dot. That spiritual energy the bone-headed woman mentioned, the Biju clarified. Ignoring the insult, Naruto continued, but even though I have the potential to use it, I'm still no closer to figuring out how I can do so. I'd ask you for help, but I doubt you'd want anything to do with this. Considering how you squander my chakra, you're correct on your assumption, Brad. For the record, I don't want to use your power. Sensei told me stories of how strong she was without you, and I want to reach her level someday. Besides, neither of us asked for the connection we share, so why not just accept what happened and go about our own business? I do my thing, and you do yours. Kyuubi snorted at that. My thing is only possible outside of the seal, and we both know you won't remove the damn thing. Well, isn't being sealed in me a better alternative than having Akatsuki take you? We still don't know why they want the Biju, but it can't be anything good, right? That we can agree on. I have my own guess on what could happen if they manage to capture our soul, but such a thought is too crazy to accept. Care to share? No? Figured as much. The Biju laid down on his side of the gate. Why not just try and split your chakra? What are you talking about? Naruto asked, raising a brow. Split your chakra, he repeated. It's a mix of physical and spiritual energies, right? Why not make a seal that splits or separates them? The blonde Uzumaki blinked at the notion. Why didn't I think of that? You've been too distracted from being able to put your full focus on the issue. With looking after that broken child and training with that hermit, you can't go 100% on the subject at hand. Why help me, then? I'm bored. Living 16 plus years inside of you drags on with nothing of interest. The only breaks from this boredom I've had were the times you used my chakra, and even those times weren't all too exciting. Although, I will admit that using my form to pin down Shikaku was both amusing and flattering. Yeah, I'm all about parading your ego around, Naruto deadpanned, earning an amused smirk from the Kyuubi. Hearing you act fearlessly around me can also be counted as interesting, to be honest. That hollow intrigues me, as well. She had this deathly presence about her, and it had a darker undertone to it. If I had to guess, hollows are the quote-unquote dark side of death. Sensei told me that the concepts of light and dark are all based on perspective. To the hidden leaf, people who are against them are dark while our allies are light. That woman really has made an impact on you, an acceptable one, I'd grudgingly admit. Good. I'd be worried if she didn't influence my life at least a little bit. Mito-sensei was there for me when I needed someone to talk to, more so than old man Hokage could have been. Well, not everyone is a spirit tethered to a physical structure, after all. Fair point. Anyway, try devising a seal that separates your spiritual energy from your physical energy. If chakra is a blend of the two, then it should only make sense for you to access by separating it from the equation. Sounds like a better idea than any of the other ones I've thought of. Thanks, Fox. He turned to leave the area holding the seal, but paused before he took a step. You know, I hope we can have more talks like this. It's refreshing talking to you when you're not all murderous and angry at me. With that, the Uzumaki walked off before he faded out of the seal, leaving the Biju to contemplate on the young man's parting words. I've recreated the Garganto I experimented with before, Aizen-sama, Sailor stated, as he stood before the flickering vacuum of space being generated in his lab. The traitorous Shinigami, once an esteemed captain of the 5th Division, had a casual smile on his face, as he observed the unstable portal between worlds that hollows could make. He could already feel the spiritual energy leaking out in a twisted and misshapen manner, further displaying the instability of the experimental Garganta. Good. Are the hollows equipped with those tracers of yours? The man asked calmly. Yes, sir. They're ready to be sent at any time, the 8th Espada replied. Saying nothing more, Aizen walked over to the Garganta, while holding up a glowing cube that had a spherical object within its core, the Mjyoku. The glowing item shined brighter while the Garganta reacted to its glow, shimmering and flickering dangerously around its edges before stabilizing. The black space within the Garganta also gained a faint violet shade, barely noticeable except at the right angles. Send 2 of them through, Sailor. And keep me informed on what happens to them, Aizen ordered, as he secured the Mjyoku within his sleeve. He then turned and walked away, leaving the Espada with his orders. Sailor said nothing in reply to Aizen's order. Instead, he picked 2 random hollows and sent them through the Garganta before closing it and moving to his data screen. He was curious about what made Kurt himself, after all. It had been 3 days since Naruto's talk with Kyuubi, and he was currently walking through the small village that the trio had decided to stay in for the night. Nell, to her delight, was seated on his shoulders, thanks to Naruto agreeing to give her a piggyback ride. She was currently leaning against the back of his head, while his hands held her legs securely on his shoulders. So, Nell-chan, what should we do first? You want to get something to eat, or do you want to see if any stalls have games? Naruto asked, playing the role of Nell's older sibling. It was something he found himself easily sliding into, considering how Konohamaru and his friends would constantly refer to him as their Nai-chan. It was endearing to him, especially since he had no siblings of his own, thanks to his parents sacrificing their lives for his own. Games? Nell wants to play games with Ruto. A ranker exclaimed excitedly. With a chuckle, Naruto nodded and declared dramatically, to the games, then. Let's go. Yeah. Nell cheered, throwing both hands into their air. Unnoticed by Naruto, Jiraiya was watching his godson's interactions with the little girl he rescued. In his opinion, he thought the girl would be a distraction to Naruto, but he was proven wrong during the previous training session, when the boy got a few clean shots on him during their spar. What really got his attention, though, was how Naruto was starting to throw out different tactics in their spars. He was now using ceiling tags to impede the Toad Sage, tags that Jiraiya was sure he never showed the kid before. This brought up the question of where Naruto learned to make them, and who taught him the basics. The Uzumaki had never shown his lineage before until recently, and the display was staggering due to the lack of prior evidence. So, he had taken to observing his apprentice when the young man thought he was out peeping, whether it was personally, with a clone, or with a small scout toad. Naruto was obviously hiding something, and he wanted to know what it was, or why he felt the need to hide it in the first place. He just hoped that Naruto would still be the knucklehead he had made his apprentice. Naruto frowned at the ceiling array he was working on, carefully taking his time with his brushstrokes, so that the formula would be neat and precise. Mito had told him, almost religiously, that his calligraphy was the worst she had ever seen from an Uzumaki. He had sulked for hours the first time he heard it, reminding the woman of her late husband's eccentricities. Just one more stroke, Naruto breathed out, as he finished the array, and backed off. With a relieved sigh, he took a moment to observe the results of his efforts, and smiled at everything looking in order. Good. Now, I just need to test it out. And what will you test it on? Kyuubi butted in from within Naruto's mind. I'm tempted to plead that you not test it on yourself, and potentially kill us both. I thought you were just chakra with a conscience. And what sort of energy do you think makes that consciousness? Chances are that I'll be just as affected by this seal of yours, as you are. So, you'd better be damned sure that it's safe before using it on yourself, brat. Naruto frowned at that, thinking over his options before shrugging to himself, and creating a shadow clone. You know what's going on, right? Yep. Gonna test it on me so that, if anything happens, I just dispel. Right. Nodding, Naruto faced his duplicate, and held up the tag. Okay then, spirit ejection seal. He declared, as he slapped the tag on his clone, and primed it with chakra. The symbols on the seal lit up a bright white before changing to a golden orange shade, and spreading across the body of his clone. The clone didn't seem bothered by anything, looking expectant, and slightly anxious, but not in any pain or discomfort. This was a good sign. After a few moments, Naruto frowned, as he saw a spectral flicker come off his clone before it was forcibly dispelled. So, I'm guessing it works since clones need chakra to exist. If the seal really ejected the spiritual energy, then the clone obviously couldn't stick around. That sounds accurate enough, Kyuubi agreed before his tone turned dry. I guess you're going to recklessly try it on yourself next, aren't you? Naruto only gave a sheepish chuckle at that, as he started preparing a second tag. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. I swear you'll be the end of me, growls the Biju. I'd stop you, but... Naruto mentally drew out. To his amusement, the fox actually sounded embarrassed, as he admitted, I'm curious about what might happen, alright. Chuckling to himself, the blonde Uzumaki finished the tag, and inspected it for a few minutes before declaring it safe. He sat on the chair the room provided, and gave a small glance towards Nell's sleeping form. He smiled softly at the young ranker before he silently placed the tag on his chest, and primed it. Like with his clone, the tag started off with a white glow before it changed to golden orange. It spread across his body evenly, splitting down the middle, as it spread to his face. After a few moments, he felt a shift in his chakra before a great force hit him like the freight train he outran while protecting Koyuki years ago. With a gasp, he felt himself get pushed back before his back hit the wall of the room, and he slid to the floor. Taking deep breaths, he observed the room, and saw that nothing was disturbed before his eyes turned to the chair he swore he was seated in. Getting to his feet, he heard a chain rattling, and looked down to see one attached to his chest, just like the one Mito had. However, instead of seeing it attached to an object, he saw that it was attached to a body, his body. It was surreal to him, seeing his physical body slouched in the chair with a chain attached to his chest that was linked to the one attached to his. Curious, he gripped the chain links closest to his chest, and gave a gentle tug. As soon as his wrist twitched to pull, he felt agonizing pain, and immediately let go with a gasp, falling to his knees, as he felt all his strength leave him in an instant. Son of a, be careful, damn it. He heard the Kyuubi rage in his mind, the seal on his stomach glowing bright red on both his physical and spiritual bodies. That chain is obviously tethering your spirit to your body. What the hell do you think will happen if you yank it off, you damned imbecile? The question and consequences sank in, and he felt a shiver of dread climb up his spectral spine. Alright, no messing with the chain. Got it. You better remember that, brat, growled Biju before he took a breath. Now, let me tell you what I'm experiencing from my end. The representation of the seal changed, as soon as your spiritual body was ejected from your physical one. What does it look like? An island, one that's surrounded by vast oceans, and what looks to be a never-ending sunset. There are also smooth stone markers that I can only assume are graves. My guess is that they're linked to people you've lost that have had a major impact on you spiritually. Can you make out any names? He heard the fox growl thoughtfully, most likely while he took a look at the gravestones. It was still a bit concerning that he had graves within his own spiritual center. I can make out 4 names, brat. The first 2 belong to your damnable father and Spitfire mother, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. The last 2 belong to that duo you faced the first time you used my chakra. Kyuubi finished. Naruto was still surprised at that. Zabuza and Haku, why would they? If I remember right, the fox cut in, you made some sort of pledge on the grave markers you made for them in Wave. Perhaps that was when that spiritual connection happened. Maybe I should really go visit their graves and see if they're still around. I'd love to talk with them again. Anyway, that's all I can see concerning the changes. I'm still tied to you, but the seal and gate changed to color with the sealing formula on it. Looks like I have slightly more freedom to move in your spiritual body. You're not going to try and overtake me or anything, will you? No? It wouldn't work anyway, I already tried. He would have face-faulted if he wasn't more concerned with what to do next. Okay, so obviously the seal works since my spiritual self is out, then that must mean. He trailed off with eyes closed, as he focused within himself, opening them again to the side of the Kyuubi seated on a solitary island that had a thin layer of grass above the sand save for the shore. On the shore itself were the grave markers that the Biju told him about, and the very center of the island had a single tree that had beautifully pure white blossoms on it. Not bad, he mused, as he walked over to the gravestones, smiling softly at the names engraved on them, and placing his hand on each one for a few seconds at a time to pay his respects. He then set his sights on the tree, and headed for it, stepping around the Biju who was watching him with disinterest. Reaching the blossoming tree, he took note of a carving made on its bark, a carving that took the shape of his clan insignia. He fought a chuckle at that, and placed his palm against it, closing his eyes to focus while his faint smile never faded. He felt an airy substance flowing through the veins of the tree, traveling upward from its roots, and spreading out to the blossoms themselves. Removing his hand, he reached up, and gently picked a blossom from one of the branches, holding it gently in his palm. He took note that, while the petals of the blossom were white, the core was the faintest orange that was only noticeable if you looked hard enough. A small island breeze picked up, carrying the blossom out of his hands, and out to sea where it settled itself atop the calm waters. However, as soon as it rested, a ripple echoed across the waters, and the blossom gave off a brilliant glow, as white as winter. Both Naruto and the Kyuubi looked on with interest, as the blossom faded away into light particles that were carried on another island breeze, this time returning to the blonde Uzumaki. He reached his arm out towards the light, letting the particles dance between his fingers before they moved to his scarf, and clung to it. The scarf gave off the same white glow that the blossom once did, and Naruto felt a rush of energy flow through him, filling the void that once held his chakra, but couldn't because of his spiritual form. The cores of his blue eyes gained a glowing white ring, before his consciousness returned to his spiritual body. He held up his arms to look at his hands, staring at the palms for a few moments before closing his eyes, and concentrating. Like when he would call upon chakra, he felt energy flow through his spiritual body, which began to flicker with white flames that originated from his scarf and abdomen. Opening his eyes once more, they had the white rings within their blue depths, and Naruto smirked in triumph at the power he felt racing through him. So this is, he mused before his spiritual body ignited in white fire, and flowed back into his physical body. He stirred before opening his physical eyes, and sitting up in the chair, holding up his right arm with the palm facing upward. Feeling further within him, he was pleased that he could differentiate it from the chakra he was born with, comparing its feel to that of oil and water, chakra. A small flicker of white fire ignited in his palm, the flames no bigger than a thumbnail, but still, it was progress. He smirked as he finished his earlier musing, I like it. The following morning, Naruto opted to sleep in for once, feeling that he earned it after his success the night before. He had moved to the bed with Nell, letting her curl against him, and rest her head atop his chest, as she slept. The two felt a measure of comfort around one another that they couldn't recall feeling for quite some time, Naruto because of the life he lived, and Nell because of her unstable spiritual energy damaging her memories. This was the scene Jiraiya opened the hotel room door to, and he felt torn about letting his godson sleep or waking him up to train him. He saw the relaxed state he was in, as he slept, as if nothing in the outside world mattered to him now. He then turned to Nell, and saw that she had a smile in her sleep, cuddled against the larger body beside her. Feeling sympathetic, the Toad Sage decided to leave the two to sleep, and quietly left the room. His apprentice needed moments to rest, and forget about the troubles he would soon face. It was night once more in the Land of Fire, and one of the more successful gambling towns was alight with life, as the night crowd enjoyed themselves. The people within the town were merry, feeling peace despite the practically never-ending Cold War between their country and the others that housed hidden villages. However, these peaceful souls were unaware that the sky above started to twist and stretch before a spatial opening formed and let out two strange creatures with bull-like masks covering their heads. The first looked avian, with a falcon-styled mask and two pairs of wings, while the tail was whip-like with vicious barbs on the end. The second looked canine, standing on all fours with strong forelegs and lithe hindlegs. It had two tails, each with spaded tips that looked as sharp as its claws, while the mask on its face took on the stylings of a jackal. The jackal hollow sniffed the air before licking its bone-covered lips hungrily. "Plenty of souls down there," he growled out, nearly yipping in excitement. The falcon hollow flapped its wings once to push its body forward, taking a more thorough look at the town below. "More than we were getting before, that's for sure." He turned back to his fellow hollow, a gleam of excitement seen in his red eyes. "What say we try a few samples?" "Alright," Jiraiya declared with a bright grin aimed at his apprentice Nelliel. Unknown to the man, it had been almost another week since Naruto discovered him. "This will be our last night staying in a town before we start trekking back to the Hidden Leaf. So, let's enjoy our last stay in civilization for a while." Naruto drew out, knowing why the Toad Sage was so excited. Since this was a ritzier town than others, this meant more attractive inspirations for his perverted book series. Looking to his side, he saw Nell looking around in growing excitement at the lights and people around her, no doubt wanting to take part in any festivities. "You want to go check out the games, Nell-chan? Or do you want to eat first?" "Nell wants to eat first," she replied. "Okay. Let's go see if there's a ramen stand anywhere," he suggested. "Eh? Ramen?" She cheered, taking off down a random street and pulling a chuckling Naruto with her. With the other two gone, Jiraiya dropped his jovial act and quickly formed a shadow clone that took the image of a nondescript man. "Keep an eye on them. We don't know what could happen." The clone nodded and followed after the younger duo, getting lost in the crowd of people. The Toad Sage frowned to himself when he was alone once again. "Something's coming, I don't know what, but I can feel it." He hoped he was just being paranoid, but that wasn't necessarily a bad thing for a spy master. The two hollows sat atop one of the buildings of the bustling town, watching the unaware souls below with hunger in their eyes. "Oh, I can't decide who to go for first," Jackal bemoaned. "Just pick some, already." Falcon snarked, his hunger making him angry. "I said you can pick our samples, so hurry up and pick." "I'm trying," but they all looked, so he cut himself short and sniffed the air for a few moments before he started salivating. "You smell that? Two high-level spiritual energies close together, and they're here somewhere. You know my sense of smell is nowhere near yours. Just take the lead, and I'll follow." "You got it. I'll sniff them out in a heartbeat," Jackal promised before taking off in the direction of the delectable spiritual presence. Naruto, with Nell on his shoulders, grinned as he won the rancor, a stuffed animal at a ball toss booth. His grin grew faintly at her choosing a fox one, and he couldn't help laughing at the irony. At least she has good taste, and sniped a Kyuubi, which only made Naruto snort in more laughter. "So, what booth do you want to try next, Nell-chan?" "Nell wants to do that fishing one." "Nell wants a." She and Naruto froze in place when they felt a faint pressure on their shoulders trying to weigh them down. Blue eyes narrowed before they darted around, looking for anything out of the ordinary. They were flicked by two odd-looking animals to look down another crowded street before quickly darting back, taking note of the bone-like masks on their heads. "Paula's?" Naruto asked softly, earning Nell's attention. "More people like Nell?" she asked quietly. He shook his head and looked to see if anyone else noticed the hollow's presence. To both his relief and annoyance, nobody did. "No, not people. They look like a dog and some weird bird." Nell responded, sounding sad, though she couldn't figure out why. Her head suddenly throbbed, and she held it as blurry images raced across her mind. "Past Dondo." Naruto heard her mumbling and grew concerned. "Nell-chan, do those two look familiar to you?" he asked, making his way out of the crowded streets and towards the nearest exit of the town. She groaned at the throbbing in her head, but still took a moment to look at the hollows as they trailed after the duo. "And no, Nell hasn't seen them before." Nodding in understanding, Naruto called on his chakra to summon a shadow clone. He handed Nell off to the clone and ordered, "Take her somewhere safe and keep an eye on her. I'll try and bait those two away." "Got it, boss," the clone replied, and prepared to head in a different direction. "But," Nell called out, still fighting her throbbing head. Naruto gave her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Nell-chan. I'll be fine, I promise." Seeing his smile and promise brought an odd feeling of deja vu to her, but it also allowed her to trust Naruto's declaration. So, she gave him the best smile she could, as the clone took her away. But one less thing to worry about, Naruto kept moving toward the exit of the town, passing through it, and moving away from the town to a darkened field that was only lit by faint moonlight. He stopped moving at that point, turning around to face the approaching hollows. "So what are two hollows doing here in the elemental nations?" he questioned with narrowed eyes, letting his chakra flow through his body. "How the hell does a human know about us if Poor-sama said no hollows ever set foot in this place?" Jackal asked. Falcon narrowed his eyes while his barbed tail twitched dangerously. "I don't know, but this human knows too much, as it is. We need to hurry and eat him before he spreads the word about our existence." Naruto's eyes narrowed further at that while Jackal licked his lips in anticipation. Sounds good to me. Let's get him. With a battle-crying yowl, Jackal charged forward while Falcon flew up and moved to circle around. Naruto knew what the play was, and he was confident he could take them both on without much trouble. So, he met Jackal's charge while forming 2 clones behind him. What? Jackal stammered out in surprise, never halting his charge. How can a human do that? You obviously never met a shinobi before, Naruto mused, as one of his clones formed a Rasengan in a couple of seconds, while the other grabbed the first arm and launched him at Falcon. Allow me to enlighten you on what you're up against. Rasengan. In an instant, an orb of dangerously swirling chakra formed in Naruto's palm, and he had it spearhead his charge. Jackal gathered his in retaliation, coating his claws in crimson energy that clashed with the inner deadlock. How the hell is a human doing this? He cried out in frustration. Falcon dove in a flash, avoiding the airborne Rasengan before clashing his bladed beak against the kunai of the second clone. TCH. Damned human. This should have been easy. You wish. The clone fired back, pushing back Falcon, and throwing a shuriken that was batted aside by the barbed tail. He then flipped through hand seals, and took a deep breath before blowing out his soul wind-style dot-drilling air bullet. Seeing the rippling wind, Falcon swerved around the bullet while whipping his tail in Naruto's direction, firing off the barbs like a small volley of kunai. They were avoided by Naruto leaping over them, forming a shadow clone to act as a springboard that he used to shoot himself toward Falcon, clocking him in his mask with a chakra-coated fist. The hollow cried, being flung back with tremendous force, and sent sprawling on the ground. Bastard. Jackal growled out, still in a deadlock with the original. Tell me how you're fighting us hollows. This shouldn't be possible. Naruto smirked at that, pumping more chakra into the Rasengan, and making it grow slowly, which allowed him to start pushing Jackal back. I told you already, I'm a shinobi. The Rasengan detonated at that, pushing back Jackal with its expulsion, while Naruto slid back a few feet with his sandals digging up twin trenches in the ground. Falcon saw this, and knew that they were outmatched. He also knew that they were expendable. They were merely scouts meant to carry recorders, so that Sailaporo could report what they witnessed in this world. As such, it didn't matter if he made it out alive or not, the 8th Espada would be getting the data regardless. Sailaporo-sama, he spoke quietly to the device clipped around his neck. If you're able to hear this, be on the lookout for a blonde human with spiked hair and blue eyes calling himself a shinobi. With his final message made, Falcon forced himself back up and gathered in his wings before flapping them towards the Uzumaki, sending out sharpened blades of wind toward the blonde. He wasn't at all surprised when the shinobi dodged them, but he did try and use the attack to give him room to make a retreat. Jackal was too injured to make a run for it, plus his lack of aerial maneuverability made him an easier target. Naruto saw the avian hollow trying to make a break for it, and he knew that he couldn't use any to catch up to him in time. So, throwing a chakra-enhanced kunai at Jackal's mask which cracked it dangerously, as it pierced through it he raced after Falcon, while stopping his chakra flow to call on whatever he could. Come on, focus it through you, and concentrate. Concentrate. He started gaining on Falcon, who was struggling with 3 wings, and a damaged 4th one. Concentrate. He felt energy stirring within him, gathering from his abdomen, and flowing into his scarf. Gather, as much as you can, and concentrate. His scarf started flickering with white fire. Concentrate, damn it. His eyes gained white rings, and he stretched his arm out towards Falcon with a cry of binding threads. Kushina. From the flickering auras surrounding the scarf, the white fire raced up Naruto's arm, and shot ahead, taking the form of a spiritual chain made of the same flickering fire. It raced toward Falcon, and speared through one of his wings before wrapping around him. What is this? He cried through the pain before he was slammed onto the ground by Naruto. Damn you, shinobi. His red eyes widened when he saw the obvious flowing from the blonde, flowing around him from the scarf he wore around his neck and shoulders. How does a human have access to spiritual power? He screeched, enraged at being beaten, but also passing along the info vocally through the device around his neck. Naruto grinned proudly at his accomplishments. Guess I'm just a special kind of human. Remember this name, Hollow, Naruto Uzumaki, shinobi, and spirit fighter. He glared hatefully at the Uzumaki, lunging as much as he could through the chain holding him down. However, the action made the white fire blaze, burning him, and making him screech before his body disintegrated into Reishi, spirit particles. The Reishi flowed into the fire chain before it receded back into Naruto's scarf, and died down, letting Naruto feel the slight increase in from absorbing the defeated Hollow. I wasn't expecting that, he mused aloud before fondly grasping his scarf. Binding threads, that's what you called, huh? Sounds pretty good to me. The threads in the scarf act like the bonds that weave through me, and my precious people. He chuckled to himself at the corny attempt at being poetic before he started heading back to the town. Unknown to him, the 2 tracers cracked because of the lack of Reishi, and crumbled into dust, scattering away in the evening breeze. It wouldn't be long before whatever was recorded would be seen and heard by Hueco Mundo's scientific espada. And it wouldn't be long before all of Hueco Mundo learned of the strange human with spiritual powers, calling himself a shinobi. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time, till then sayonara.